joining us. You can tell we're really casual. We're just going to, Chrissy's going to start us up in just a minute. We're glad that you're here. You can hear us.
Okay, looks like we're at the top of the hour. Shall I get us started, Patty? Would you like to wait a minute or two?
Yeah, no, go ahead. We can go ahead and start.
All right, good. Well, hi everyone, and happy Wednesday. Welcome to our Conversation Project Community Call. I hope that you are all having a great week. My name is Chrissy Cronin, and I will be your WebEx host. While we're waiting for everyone to join us, I'd like to run through a few WebEx tips and tricks. If you can hear my voice right now, you have connected successfully. If you would like to change your audio preferences, please click the Audio and Video tab at the top of your screen and click Switch Audio. You can also find this by clicking the Mute Unmute button at the bottom of the screen. If you have a question or comment at any point during the call, feel free to type into the chat box. The way to do this is by selecting the chat bubble that is at the bottom right of your screen. Once you click this, the chat box will open up. To send a public message, write your message at the bottom of your screen and send it to everyone. You can also use the raise your hand icon, which is located in the right-hand side of the chat, and we'll call on you to voice your question. If you're having any technical difficulties, please chat to host and I will help you. We're going to take a moment to get things started in the chat. Type into the chat box your name, location, organization, and type of organization, whether that be faith, healthcare, community, government, volunteer, or other. Make sure to send your message to everyone. Thanks, everyone. Keep chatting in as we continue with the call. We have a great group today. With that, I'll turn things over to Patty Webster, the advisor for the Conversation Project. Take it away, Patty.
Awesome. Thank you, Chrissy. And hello, everybody. How are you doing? I'm just going to see who's here, and I am excited to see some familiar names and faces. We've got a small, intimate group so far. So we are going to keep this casual, and I want you to continue using chat. We are all about making sure we're making connections. So keep popping your name in there if you haven't yet. And if you see someone in your neck of the woods or not even in your neck of the woods you want to connect with, we're going to use chat heavily. We always encourage you guys to connect online, even during presentations. I think we're good with that. So I'm happy to see everybody here. And so Debbie, Austin, Texas. I was down there a little while ago before COVID, which seems like ages ago. And I'm excited to see Ronnie Genser here. Hi, Ronnie. And we got some Vermont, Lori from Vermont. This is fabulous. I'm a little jealous, Elizabeth, in Costa Rica. I'm excited that you're down and maybe having a well-deserved break, so that's fantastic. So thank you all for coming and joining us today. So I am going to do a little bit of housekeeping before we jump in and introduce the fabulous folks you have in front of us. You can see Christopher and Kathy and Philip that are here on video, and we're just excited to have them here to share with us today. So some of you may know, I know some of you do know, we have a quarterly community activity survey that we use to really help get an understanding of what's happening in the field. So if your work has been influenced by the Conversation Project at all, really encourage you to fill that survey out if you haven't yet. We're going to come back to this at the end of the call and have a link for you to be able to do that at the end. We track events, we track number of people that our community members are being reached to see impact, but we also have open-ended questions every quarter. So if you are not doing anything, if you're brand new and just starting, we have open-ended on how we can best serve you. So we'd love for you to at least answer some of those open-ended questions if you can. So I am going to this is a random question, but we are doing some connections with Respecting Choices. If some of you are familiar with Respecting Choices, they were founded through Gunderson Lutheran and now run a whole wonderful program on patient and family-centered care and end-of-life care within healthcare systems. If you're using Respecting Choices or are a certified facilitator, if you don't mind, I'd love to connect with you. Pop that into the chat and let me know if you are a certified facilitator. So we're just trying to see who's using both Conversation Project and Respecting Choices. They're going to be doing the same on their community calls as well, so just let me know. And you can, hi Ronnie. You guys can continue chatting, and I'm just going to just move us forward and share a little bit of the agenda. Alrighty. Oh, super. Thanks, Lori, for sharing that. So you did the basic training. If you don't mind connecting with me afterwards, either you can email me. I've got my email at the end of this, or if you want to pop your email in here, that would be great. If you don't mind, that we make a little connection on that. Thank you. Thank you, Lori. So let me just share a little bit about what today is all about. And actually, let me ask you all, because there are a few names that are new. Let me ask, are you familiar with the Conversation Project? Is anybody on the call new? There's a little bit of background. I'm not sure if that's me. Kathy, let me ask you to mute yourself. But if you're new to Conversation Project, or if you are very familiar, why don't you go ahead and pop that into the chat button, chat box, so I can kind of gauge who's new and who's not. And we've got some call-in users too, and I understand that you won't be able to do the chat, but we'll find a way to pull you guys in as well. And so you guys can keep chatting that in, and I'll just go over the agenda while you chat that in. So this is what we're going to cover in the next 53 minutes or so. I'm going to do a little bit of a framing and background to those that are new, and so I see some that are a little bit of new. Oh yeah, Deborah, you just wrote our beautiful blog post, so thank you. I'll do a little bit of framing on why this call and why this topic. And then we're going to spend a majority of the call really hearing from our three fabulous guests that are going to share a little bit about what they're doing in the field. And then we're going to open it up. We'll have each of them go one after the other, but then we'll spend time with any questions, discussion, anything that's resonating with you, and then just have you all share some of your experiences and examples if you're doing things reaching students in your own activities. We'll have some time after the presentations. And then I'll just do a little bit of what's coming up next and share a little bit of a wrap up at the end. So that is our agenda for today. Anything else that you guys want to cover, go ahead and pop that in chat. I'll just pause every once in a while to go over the chat. And, oh, great. You're using our services through Gift. Thanks, Debbie, for sharing that. Okay, so if there's anything else that you all want to cover today, let me know. And we'll just, as we go along, we'll take a look and see what else we can highlight for you all. So for those that are new, the Conversation Project really is, as you know, those that aren't new, our mission is to help people share their wishes for care through the end of life, and really helping people do that early and often before a medical crisis is happening. And so we do that through really three prongs. So our work is focusing on raising awareness and normalizing the conversations through media, social media, and getting the word out through public awareness. The second prong of our work is providing content which we hope is useful, tools, our conversation starter kits, materials and resources, and we've got a whole host of resources for community members like yourself who are spreading this through your communities. And so our third prong, and what our call today really is about, is we are here together to create this network and to help you bring the Conversation Project to your communities, because really you know those communities best. And so our calls are about that, and we really want to help connect with people where they live, work, pray, and learn. And so we've been using this motto for a while now in the Conversation Project, and this learn part we added because of what we've been seeing heavily over the last few years. And so I love this quote. This is a quote from one of our biggest champions, is Reverend Scott Johnson out in Oregon. He started with us way at the beginning. He's working with some high schoolers and bringing the Conversation Project to high schoolers. And he says, young people can play a key role in bringing change to other generations. They can be a catalyst for the beginning of family conversations, and they can encourage their parents and grandparents. And I love this. He does some work through St. Charles Health System. They pair with their high school through a health occupations program, and he teaches a class on end of life. We have a case study on what Reverend Scott is doing, but he pinpoints that this is really an opportunity and a resource that sometimes goes untapped as our youth. But it's not just encouraging family conversations. What we're seeing a lot is young nursing students, med students, and we're going to hear from a couple today and from some professors that are doing this, really understanding the importance of the concept of what matters to me to help bring about change in the healthcare system and support patients and families through person-centeredness. And so it's really exciting for us to see that. And as we've been seeing that, last year around this time, we had a huge uptick through that community survey and through some calls that we have like this. A lot of different community members were asking us, hey, can you connect us with those that are reaching students? We're interested in reaching students. We are either just thinking about it or we're doing that. Can we create some type of connection? So we created a community of practice, a small community of practice that was really made up of individuals who were either students themselves or reaching students in one shape or form. And so this is just a sampling of some of our past and current members of this community practice. The three that are going to share today are part of this community. We meet once a month and talk. Basically, it's just to share ideas around how to reach students and how best to share this within that community and the bridge between students, communities, and healthcare systems. And so we've got folks that are reaching students through medical and nursing school courses. We have folks that are teaching either guest lectures or research courses in ethics, bioethics, and humanities, and sharing not just the Conversation Project resources, but a whole host of resources that are out there that you might be familiar with around end-of-life care. There's some fantastic resources. And we also have some folks that are reaching or teaching through seminaries, and so faith-based educational institutions, and a couple healthcare systems that are partnering either with their local high schools, as I mentioned, Reverend Scott Johnson is, or through universities. So it's a great mix of folks that are really learning together. And so today we're going to hear from them. And so this formed last year, and so we've had some really great sharing, and we learned so much through the Conversation Project that we hope to spread even wider through our community and through others. And we hope to capture a little bit about what you're doing if you're reaching students, if you're on the call and you're already doing something to reach students. Lately, what we've been seeing, so over the last 6 months, 6 to 8 months since COVID happened, and we're kind of looking a little bit into our data. I know our past member, Christopher, will be interested in this because he used to help us look at some of the metrics that we collect. But we're seeing an uptick and an increase in young people coming to our website. So the age range there of 18 to 24-year-olds being interested in and searching for something on our website in one shape or form. We also did a call for blogs, and Debbie, who's on the call, just wrote a piece. If you haven't seen some of the recent blogs that we've sent out, I encourage you to share, to go to our website and take a peek at those blogs. But in our call for blogs, we saw a pretty big amount of Generation Z and millennials wanting to share their story and tell their experiences. And we were so honored to be able to share these stories that folks have written for us. So given all that interest, we thought that this would be a perfect time to gather together and share a little bit about what we're learning and give an opportunity for folks who are reaching students, our students themselves, to share that. And so what does that mean for you all who are reaching your community members? We thought that this would be a good opportunity to really have you think about, if you haven't yet, the messaging that you're doing and maybe package some of the resources that you're sharing to include students and young adults. And so it's not just students, it's those that might be not in school but are in jobs and really thinking about this. They could be some of your messengers, and as I mentioned before, an untapped resource to kind of share this throughout your community. They can be future health and community catalysts, as you'll learn a little bit today in our call, and really help to connect generations. We see a lot of that, intergenerational connections. So think about that if you haven't yet. And if you haven't yet thought about partnering with educational institutions, that could be someone you might want to think about partnering with. So that's just a little bit of a background and framing to why this call today. And so I want to jump into the meat of the call and really dive into some of the examples that hopefully will resonate with you all. So let me just, before I introduce these three, let me just pop over to chat. Chrissy, am I missing anything? Any questions?
So far, so good. Sorry, Kathy, just saw that you you're on mute button. There you go.
Okay. And so, oh, this is great. So you're coming from financial advisors work, Debbie. That's, we've actually have a lot of professional service organizations doing this work. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start with Philip. And so I'm going to introduce all three of them, but go into a little bit of an introduction when each of them present. And so we've got Philip Berenson, who is here and a student at University of Michigan Medical School. We have Dr. Kathy Ahern Gould, who is with Boston College. And we've got Christopher Yoshi, a student who is with University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. And I'll do a little bit more of an introduction when we go. So we're going to start with Philip, and I'm really excited to introduce Philip. We first met when he was down in Florida, and now he has shifted from warm weather to cold weather up in Michigan. So I hope you're surviving the start of the cold. It hasn't come yet, so I'm sure it's going to be bad. But Philip is coming to us from, he's a first-year medical student, as I mentioned. He's doing an MD PhD program. And pursuing his graduate training in healthcare infrastructure and learning systems, which I'm excited to, we'll have to continue that discussion because I'm really big on learning systems as well, Philip. Over the past 2 years, he's worked on developing and researching some really novel peer-led models of engaging young adults in advanced care planning. So he's going to share a little bit of that with us today. So with that, Philip, we're going to pass you the ball. Give us you the ball. Chrissy beat you. Thank you.
Great.
A little slow. All right. So take it away, Philip.
All right. So what I want to go into today is I'm going to kind of talk about my work in evidence-based reasoning for community outreach, especially young adults. And I know everyone here is not a researcher, so I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds of data collection and everything else, but over the last 2 years, I worked to look at an evidence-based model to develop peer-led models for advanced care planning advocacy with young adults. And this was recently published in the Journal of American Hospice and Palliative Medicine alongside with Dr. Lindsay Davidson. So when we set out 2 years ago, we were really interested in first assessing the feasibility and efficacy of actually reaching young adults. Young adults in this case being undergraduate college students, ages about 18 to 25. And while a lot of people have been doing this work in recent years, the scientific literature has not actually established a precedent on how easy it is to do this. And without actually establishing that, I feel like a lot has just been swinging in the dark, and there hasn't been a lot of consensus on how do we move forward with reaching this population. So our first aim was really to set out how feasible is it and how willing are students to engage in this information. And the second was, with developing a peer-led workshop design, based on social identity theory, we were curious how effective in the short term these workshops would actually be in both changing behavior in young adults, such as engaging with loved ones in discussion about end-of-life care, as well as completing their own advanced directives or engaging with the conversation starter kits or other resources, and as well as how did this long-term affect their knowledge and confidence related to advanced care planning. Because one of the largest barriers that's shown up time and again in the communication literature for all age groups is education around material related to advanced care planning. What is an advanced directive? What is hospice versus what is palliative, et cetera, et cetera. So let me move on here. We ended up designing a workshop using the Conversation Project's community presentation slides, which we adapted specifically for presentation to young adults at the university setting. So we developed our workshops in three parts. An introduction where we really tried to discuss the relevance of advanced care planning, what the future looks like, especially how this applies to the individual students we were reaching out to. We then went forward with more of a lecture-based discussion on ACP, advanced care planning-based terminology, and was more of an education so that as we dove further into the discussion, we were able to communicate further as we moved into facilitated discussions. As for the big part here was the peer-led design. We were really interested in how do we get students to present to students, not people who are professionals present to students, not people in the field, but students themselves. As we were interested in how much individuals would better receive information, be acting if someone within their own in-group were able to communicate that. And so this was able to establish a precedent for potentially using this, and I think moving forward people should be interested in continuing to evaluate that. So we would go about recruiting student organizations actually by recruiting students to our workshops by using pre-existing framework and infrastructure of student organizations on campus. Whether that be through student interest groups, professional groups, or volunteer groups, we found using these pre-existing student interest groups and student organizations as a prime way of accessing a pre-existing framework instead of having that we could use to get students into a single place. And so we reached out to over 100 student organizations throughout the University of South Florida's campus. We were able to recruit during active workshop times. And then as well, which if anyone's more interested in discussing with this afterwards, our actual evaluation workshops was developed using a repeated measures mixed method design in which we evaluated both confidence, knowledge, as well as qualitative discussion related to advanced care. And if people are more interested in discussing the actual evaluation, we can talk about that afterwards. So I think I'm going to briefly go through these results, but look more at our takeaways here. But we ended up engaging over about a 3-month period, 75 students who actually completed our evaluation tools, and in mean ages ranging from 18 to 25, with predominantly female students taking part in the workshops. Overall, though, we did have a diverse student backgrounds, both ethnically and racially, with a large, predominantly Latino-Hispanic population, which may be more so to the fact that the University of South Florida's student population has a very large Latino-Hispanic population, but also provides an interesting note that, especially in the literature, it shows that people who are of Hispanic Latino backgrounds are sometimes more reluctant to engage in advanced care planning. So essentially engaging with younger adults could be a way of engaging with these communities through accessing generationally. As well, a majority of our students who engaged identified their area of undergraduate study to be within the realms of STEM, specifically people who are in student groups for pre-health professions and public health interest groups. So there is a correlation between interests there and students who are willing to engage, at least in the shorter time frame of study. I'm not going to get too deep into this again, but we were able to demonstrate that within a 2-week period, we were able to significantly increase participant knowledge and confidence related to advanced care planning, both through a series of 31 true and false knowledge-based questions, as well as a Likert scale-based confidence within a 2-week follow-up period. More so, out of 18 of the participants who completed our 2-week follow-up, we did see about 50% of participants completed some form of advanced care planning, whether it's directly completing an advanced directive or that was just communicating with friends or families about information shared during the workshops. This is a small sample size, but I think it shows, at least in a pilot study, where we can move forward going through this. We don't need every young adult to write an advanced directive necessarily, but if you can get to a point in which people are more willing to discuss or they feel more confident discussing, especially with young adults, we feel that is a key area to move forward. How you get people just more willing to just talk to their parents about this, their friends, their colleagues, think about it professionally. And so moving forward, we really want to see, especially beyond 2 weeks, long-term impact of how do engaging in these workshops actually impact students.
2 more minutes.
Great. So again, if people are more interested in the exact evaluation techniques or tools we use to develop in the long period, please feel free to reach out to me or ask in the Q&A later. But I think the key takeaways I want to really push from our work with undergraduate students is a peer-led model. It shows promising method to reaching students, and we feel like we got less pushback from students being able to discuss this in their own in-group and talking to other students about this. I think if this needs further investigation, we need to do more comparative work with other models of reaching young adults to establish efficacy. We were able to establish new tools to be utilized alongside existing standardized tools to evaluate program efficacy. And even if you're not planning to do evidence-based research related to this, I think it's important if you're developing community models to self-evaluate your own systems and determine how effective is your work and how can you improve the efficacy of that. We were able to demonstrate that workshops are effective in short-term improvement of individual knowledge and confidence related to advanced care planning, and future work needs to consider longer-term follow-up. And some various factors that should be kept in mind when working, especially with undergraduate students, and we saw this a lot in our scheduling, where scheduling within the academic calendar is very important to consider. Undergraduate students, especially as semesters go on, exams pile up, their commitments pile up, they become less willing or their time becomes less available to actually engage with this. So if you're working around the academic calendar, very much consider what are the impacts of when you reach out to students, because it plays a major role, and thinking about these factors related to students, as well as the utilization of student organizations or pre-existing infrastructure as secondaries instead of trying to independently reach students. It can add a lot both to your own authority in partnering with organizations and university, and provides a pre-existing framework for students to actually meet under. I think overwhelmingly the main takeaway I want to really push from our work here was that students were very eager to engage with this. It wasn't something they were shying away from, and those small sample sizes, we were able to start to demonstrate the feasibility of expanding work to this population. So I'll get ready to pass it off to the next presenter, but if anyone has more questions that they want to ask me on my own time, here's my contact information, and I'd love to share both any resources, evaluation tools, study publications, and really discuss how we can apply more evidence-based practice to community outreach. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Philip. Really appreciate some of the key lessons that you pulled out. Some of the concepts that you're talking about, the student-to-student really was effective, is often a concept that we use, not just with students, but adults as well. So think about the messenger and who that might resonate with. You mentioned timing to teach them. I think that's really important. So what is the right timing to reach students? So I appreciate some of these key lessons. And then using those pre-existing groups. And we also, again, like, don't try to create something new. How do you tap into what's already out there? So really great lessons. Thank you so much. If you have questions for Philip, go ahead and you can pop that in chat. We're going to move to Kathy. So we're going to do all 3 speakers and then get to questions. But go ahead and pop in any thoughts, any ideas or questions for Philip. You can go ahead and pop that in chat. Thank you so much, Philip. And so we're going to move to Dr. Kathy Ahern-Gould next. And Kathy is coming from Boston College. So I think of the cold weather. It's coming. So hopefully it'll be a nice, mild winter for you, Kathy. Kathy is a critical care nurse and editor-in-chief of Dimensions of Critical Care Nursing. She's an adjunct faculty at Boston College, as I mentioned, and she's teaching both undergraduates and graduate students. nurses and helping them really understand the concept of what matters and among other concepts. Kathy's been involved with the Conversation Project, but specifically also the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, of which the Conversation Project is an initiative of. And I loved hearing this, Kathy, that you started being involved with IHI as a graduate student and did some hospital-based educator training through IHI's 100 million lives campaign. So that was fun for me to learn that about you, Kathy. She introduces the Conversation Project and the language of what matters most to sophomore nursing students in their first clinical rotation, as well as in a population health course for senior students that are working in a community setting. So Kathy's going to share a little bit about that today. So I'm going to pass that. Chrissy's going to pass you the ball and have you go ahead and share a little bit about what you're learning, Kathy.
Thank you. So thank you, Patty. And I just want to share a little bit about how during the early days of COVID, we had to change a lot of our courses very quickly. We had to convert much of our teaching to a totally online program, both asynchronous and synchronously. And we were teaching a population health course, which are seniors. We always introduced them to the population health modules at IHI, and often we're able to include seminars with the Conversation Project. What we decided to do was we looked at what could we do totally virtually, and it was very easy launch to convert this program and actually design a new program to introduce the Conversation Project. The advantage was students were already members in the open school, so they had already taken a lot of courses. The Conversation Project module is completely free above and beyond the open school, and all of the tools were already accessible. These students are digital learners now, so it's an easy conversion using all of the virtual tools and using all of the things on IHI to build a program. So it was very, very easy. And as Philip mentioned, we were in the middle of an academic semester, so it was very easy to fill in content at that point. What we did was we developed a 3-part program. We had to use some Zoom to keep the students engaged and to give them instructions. And we used Zoom to kick off the Conversation Project program. And we decided to do 3 parts of it. We would introduce a conversation program. We would use what matters language and what matters education. And we would also include the National Healthcare Decision Day, because that was to fall about a month after we started to design this program. Everything was already online. Everything was available to us. We just had to link it and access it to our Canvas courses. We also decided to sandwich in a book read, which was really a great idea, and the books we chose all related to end-of-life care. And the students could choose from 3 or 4 of them to read. They were to do a reflection on, number 1, the Conversation Project module, then a reflection on their book read, and then the 3rd part is we extended the program to continue till April to include National Healthcare Decision Day. And we asked the students, using the tools and languages they had heard about and learned about from the Conversation Project, and many other links and tools we included, giving them resources for advanced directives for each state and locality where they lived, and giving them some samples of how we spoke to other family members. And we used some of our Zoom calls to practice how we would talk to family members or friends and family. So they were able to complete the Conversation Project module, do a book read, and really engage with what some people had experienced. And then on National Healthcare Decision Day, launch an email to friends and family. And then the final part, at the end of the semester, we did a reflection of the whole program. That was supposed to be a 2-hour program. And as I said to Patty, it went on for almost 4 hours. The students really wanted to share everything they did. We started with a challenge. This is from a slide program I use, and we put this up on our Canvas site and just opened the discussion for them, asking them, what if something happened? Would you know what to do? Would the doctors know what to do? Would your family members know what to do? Some of the things we already know that worked well, everything was able to load on our educational site, in the Canvas site. The students' assignments could be loaded to Canvas, so everything was virtual. And we did use Zoom consistently each week to allow some synchronous and asynchronous work to merge together and to stay in contact with them. And we also had virtual office hours, which many people are using during this online learning. Next time, I don't think I would have to do the whole 30 or 40-minute presentation about what matters. I would actually give them more visual tools. I have one, just a slide presentation that uses a lot of quotes from the Conversation Project. And what we would ask them to do, it's a photo packet, put photos that are important to them and put quotes that struck them or that they learned or connected with throughout their learning, or quotes from family members or themselves as they learned more about this. And then they would develop a new PowerPoint and a new presentation that reflected more of their work. And these are some of the things that were in mind. My daughter got married. I used this picture about there are many opportunities to open this conversation. This is a picture from Atul Gawande's Frontline program. And we used a lot of quotes and a lot of work from his book, Being Mortal. So they love these kind of visual things with the quotes involved. These are some of the quotes that I pulled from some of their reflections. And I have so many of them that I've collected over the years, but they really personalized their learning. And they talked about family members. This one was about a grandfather with COPD and is currently struggling, but yet her family hasn't had any discussions. And what this made her realize is, I don't know who will speak for him. And during our final conversation, many of them said, we'll be the nurses in the family, we'll be the medical people. We might be the people who do speak for them. So not only do we need to know this information for our patients, we need to know it for our families.
2 minutes, Kathy.
Okay, this was a girl who talked about, they didn't really talk about death other than funeral arrangements and where someone would want to be buried, but one conversation she remembers having with her grandmother is about a ring. And she wondered if having that conversation about the ring might be an opening for another conversation. And she said something very telling, that what we were learning, our group was at Mass General Hospital. Of course, we had many COVID patients. There were so many things going on. And they realized that a lot of family members thought this was not a good time to talk about it. But this student said, I know that the time to have this conversation is not on FaceTime 10 minutes before you're intubated in an ER or an ICU. And this is happening every day during COVID. I thought that was so telling. And this is just another one about they'd like to have deeper conversations, and they think this really prepared them. The book reflections were very telling, and this is a young student that said already in her practice she had seen loved ones die with future chemotherapy sessions or things that were still planned. So never getting to that point of acceptance or understanding that it was a normal process. And this was one that I actually shared with them. I, as an ICU nurse, had seen many, many patients on LVADs or ECMO or different forms of life support. And I read the book, You Can Stop Humming Now, which is written by a doctor at Brigham and Women's Hospital. And a patient told her, you can stop that humming now, meaning you can shut off the LVAD machine now. And I thought of all the patients that I had cared for that were stuck on machines because a decision had been made to continue treatment, and maybe families and patients hadn't had the time to talk about this, and how that book really made me cry for all the moral distress I had had. And I said when I cried, I think I cried for my patients, and I cried a little bit for me too. And they just loved that I was able to share that with them. So it opened to another hour of many stories already in their young lives that they had experienced. So even though they hadn't much clinical experience and they were senior nursing students, This was a very rich experience, as it has been in everything we have done. But the wonderful thing with this, it was very easy to completely go virtual with this and still have it be a very rich experience. It may have even allowed them some individual time and some personalization that they would not have had if they were in a classroom setting.
Thank you, Kathy. I really appreciate the power of stories you've demonstrated, especially when the students wanted to continue to speak and share those stories 2 hours after the class had ended. So I think that it really shows that this work, leading and using stories, is a real big draw for students. I love how you all tapped NHBD, so National Healthcare Decisions Day. We're seeing that a lot with groups. It's a natural fit. Maybe that fits with the student's schedule, as Philip was saying, like watch out for the time frame that you're doing. But I think it's a really good way to tap into a national event that's happening. You also mentioned that, the ideas of how to reach students. So thinking about what resonates with them, and we say that with our communities in general. So think about who you're trying to reach and what type of method or platform might work with them. And so I love how you've co-designed this with students. So thank you so much for sharing. If you, and Deborah has a comment for you here, Kathy. Her dream is to teach nursing students about palliative care. So I love this. So I'm thinking there's some good connections being made here. If you guys want to chat a little bit more.
Please contact me, and I have so many things that we've done over the year, from the What's Matters talks to the Conversation Project. But I did share with Patty, and I have a file of even the letters that the students wrote to friends and families that were so packed full of resources. They've given me permission to use all of their materials too, so I'll be happy to share.
It's an incredible amount of examples that you've had from your own students and willing to share that. And I think that's also kind of noteworthy, is that people want to share those stories and want to talk about this once you get going. And I know Christopher has some examples with that as well. So I'm going to thank you so much, Kathy. I'm going to kind of shift our gears a little bit. If you have questions or other comments for Kathy, go ahead and pop that in the chat, and we'll come back to you after Christopher. So thank you for sharing that. And so we're going to move now to Christopher Yoshi, who is near and dear to my heart, because Christopher is a former project coordinator at the Conversation Project and worked with the Institute for Healthcare Improvement before he moved down to Texas. And I don't see your cowboy hat, but I know that you are in a fantastic place right now. He's currently pursuing his MD, MPH at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center and the University of Texas Health Science Center. So Christopher, take it away and have you share a little bit about what you're doing down there with your fellow students.
Yeah, thank you. It's kind of funny to be on the other side, because once upon a time I was helping Toasties. So I'm going to share a bit about a program that we're just sort of starting up in our medical school. And so we're actually sort of more fully starting in a week or two. So I'll share kind of what we thought about, how it's gone so far, and then certainly, we'll be learning a lot more over the next few months. So I was approached over the summer by a couple of my fellow classmates and a geriatrician at this medical school about starting a new student organization. So they had already run this program with undergraduate students, and they wanted to expand it to medical students. So the program is modeled after a national organization called the Hospital Elder Life Program, which is currently run by the American Geriatric Society. And they use a multidisciplinary team to implement targeted interventions aimed at reducing cognitive and functional decline in hospital older adults. So it's actually sort of a component or can be sort of an element of the age-friendly health systems work, if you've heard of that. So that's something IHI is doing. And so this is sort of one of those interventions you can take to improve the care of older adults in the hospital. So this specific part of what we're doing is really focused on a part of the program that's aimed at reducing delirium. So delirium is a like sort of acute confusion that often happens in the hospital. And we're using volunteers to sort of use interventions to try to reduce that delirium. So specifically, we'd be using medical students to visit patients in the hospital. And a lot of what they would be doing is orientation activities, cognitive stimulation, encouraging exercise, etc. And so, again, we know kind of regular interaction and regular sort of stimulation can really reduce the chance of delirium and sort of reduce hospital stays and really impact their long-term trajectory. Oops. So our kind of twist, what we're doing at specifically at Southwestern. So as the geriatrician was describing all these interventions and the things that our med students would be doing, it really seemed like a good opportunity to ascertain patients' wishes. So we were kind of going to be talking to patients in a more casual setting, and really we weren't sort of time constrained by the times that physicians have. Often they only have 15 minutes to have these conversations, and here we could have a half an hour more casual conversation. So I kind of said, if we learn about their wishes and what they really value, is there a way we could document that? And so the hospital is actually really excited, in the department, so they're going to be giving us the ability to actually write in the health record and actually put in some of these details about sort of their patient wishes and what's most important to them, about their family, their support network, etc. And so what's really great is this also allows medical students to sort of practice taking that sort of social history and updating it. So it kind of gives a benefit to the patients, sort of because their care team will know more holistically about what matters to them. Benefits to the medical students in terms of practicing and getting comfortable with these conversations, some of which may be difficult. And benefit to the care team because they'll be able to walk in sort of knowing all this information about the patient, and it will sort of be documented for every new clinician that comes in rather than having to ask about it every time. In addition to this volunteer work, part of what we want to do is an educational component. So we have workshops, including things on narrative medicine, on what is palliative care. And this is the idea that unfortunately a lot of this information is not really baked into the medical school curriculum right now. So we're trying to do sort of an adjunct way of teaching these concepts to everyone. And the geriatrician I work with always talks about the fact that even if you're not going into geriatrics, most doctors are going to treat older adults, and it's a growing segment of the population. And really the principles that apply to care of older adults really apply to everyone, right? We should be asking everyone what really matters to them. We should be talking about their preferences and wishes. And, we should be making sure that everyone is sort of engaged and, has company in hospital and stuff like that. So a lot of those principles really we think should apply to all medical students. So what we're currently doing, so we're actually about to start volunteering virtually. So we're going to do that hopefully starting next week. And so rather than going into the rooms, we're going to be calling into the patient rooms for now. We have a really engaged group of students, about 10 to 15 people, who we've had a couple trainings with them. And one thing I really want to highlight is we started our training inviting them to share personal stories. And personal stories often of people in their family, older adults in their family, like grandparents. And it was really it was wonderful to see how much people made a connection sort of between the work we were doing here and how it impacted their own family. And sort of they saw that, the patients we're going to go volunteer with could easily be their grandparents. And they understood that their grandparents had all these complex wishes and they're more than just a patient. And I think it really open their eyes to the fact that these patients they're going to see are more than a patient or more than their chart, and they're really a more complex person. Also want to mention is a small sample size, but it heavily skewed women. And we have about 50-50 split in the medical school. And so for whatever reason, when we recruited, we got mostly female students that were interested. And I just thought of that because what Philip mentioned. Part of our future work, so we really want to develop a more robust measurement strategy, sort of as Philip alluded to, really evaluating, again, what are the impacts on the medical students and sort of their view of care in the future, and then also what impact does it have on the older adults. And then also, hopefully starting next year, we want to involve other students. So we have partnerships with nursing school and physical therapy school, And so we want to try to bring in those students into this work. And I'll leave it there, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Fantastic. Thank you, Christopher. I'm so heartened to see and just hear what you, Philip, and Kathy are sharing, all three of you, especially from a student perspective. And it gives me great hope for our future healthcare system to hear about the caring clinicians, that newbie clinicians that just got their white coats, that what you're doing to actually bridge that gap between, and as you mentioned, there's sometimes the lack of time. And so really tapping the power of students to bridge that gap between connecting patients and families who are people, their stories to, and what matters to them, to the healthcare and clinical team that's there. So I love some of the lessons that you've been sharing. Really that human connection. You mentioned that stories, that all of a sudden your group of students are connecting like, hey, this is something that I should be taking home for my own family members, or recognizing that this is not just in their own healthcare setting, but also in their family setting. The partnerships that you mentioned is really exciting to see. And I know some others in our community practice have been partnering. So it's not just nursing and clinical, but really who else can we partner with as we do this work. I want to make sure that we have time for folks to, if there's any questions or answers, I'm going to take a peek at the chat, and I'll open it up in a second. Christopher, thank you so much for sharing. We're excited that you're there, forging your path there. So thank you so much for being on the call. And Kathy and Philip, I appreciate all of you all spending this time. Any questions or any thoughts? I'm going to just move us to just in the last 10 minutes. Just want to see and just open it up. If anybody has questions for Christopher, Kathy, or Philip, go ahead and pop that in. You can also, as Chrissy mentioned, you can raise your hand if you want to get off mute and ask anything or just have any comments. We can do that as well. So I'm just going to pause for a minute and see if anybody has anything to pop in the chat. An alternate option as well, and I will give you time. I know silence, we need to give you guys some time to chat. If you don't have questions, what experience do you have or might you have with students, or any thoughts if you're thinking about reaching students, or you are doing that? Maybe share some ideas that you've been working on. You can also pop that in chat. So just pause for a minute and let folks pop in their comments. Thanks for your feedback, Lori. Laura, I love
what Lori said. I actually know a couple people who got involved in our program that they did a similar hospice volunteer program in college, and that was really impactful.
It's a great idea. And I feel like like tapping into that volunteer work, it can also be done in high schoolers. I know I had high schoolers that were looking for volunteer work. It's a great opportunity for them as well. So it's not, I know we just have, we're representing the upper level students here, but I know the concepts can resonate with others. Yeah, I think it's, Laura, you're mentioning it sparks people's interest. Christopher and Philip, have you noted that this is sparking interest in some of the work that students are doing?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think actually, I was just talking to one of the the peer-led leaders who did some of our education workshops that we trained to, and he's actually now a medical student at, I believe, Kansas City osteopathic school, but he's actually now developing a similar project that Christopher is doing, and I think, and he hadn't necessarily been interested or engaged with advanced care planning before, but his, just as an example, learning about this, but then being a peer leader on the information has now helped him take up advocacy elsewhere. But I think in general, it definitely, at least on my end, I think I saw a lot of people who became much more interested or kind of carried on conversations. And I think especially people who are going into healthcare professions, whether it's people I talked to who are pre-med students, pre-nursing, pre-dental. I think I saw a lot of that. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Philip. So Deb was sharing, she's never, when you were a nursing student, never received any training on having conversations around end-of-life care, advanced care planning, etc. So I'm reading this for those that are calling in. So Deb was saying that being a new graduate in the ICU and trying to learn as she went was interesting. So I feel like this hasn't maybe been around as long as it should be, depending on the pockets, because I think it's probably different for every school. And Deborah's mentioned she hopes to be able to do something like this for future nursing students and maybe even using simulations to start. Kathy, you also mentioned you were doing some simulations. We just have one more minute to share, and then I'm going to do some wrap up. But do you want to share, weren't you part of your coursework doing some simulations? Oh, Kathy, you know what? You're on mute, actually. Okay.
We have a simulation program that most schools do have on kind of a death and dying format. And we tried to move more of the what matters language into that. So it's not totally about hospice and end of life and dealing with the families at that point. We try to move the conversation in earlier. And I think for young nurses, all of our nurses, when we have talked about what matters conversations, the conversation project, giving them the tools, they have said, why haven't we learned this sooner? And they would like to learn it. And that's why we moved the what matters language into the very first clinical rotation. How do I talk to patients? Rather than giving them all the interview questions and formats, talk to them about what matters to them. And that's a great way to introduce just talking to patients and families. For people that are now graduated and they haven't done this, and especially someone who's in critical care, the nursing literature and the healthcare literature in general is being flooded with information about helping early palliative care decisions take place in critical care units. We even use a module talking about the surprise question on rounds. Do you think this patient will be here in another year? How to bring this conversation to the critical care areas is one of our biggest challenges, because those are the areas we don't like to raise the white flag off, and we want to try to do everything. But it's one of the most important areas to have these discussions. So we're doing a lot as an editor and as a writer. I do a lot in the nursing literature, and many people are doing a lot of this work. So it's wonderful for nursing students and new to practice nurses and experienced nurses who had never been exposed to this information in their previous education.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Kathy. Christopher's also sharing a little bit about just that the nursing students really are, perhaps more than anyone, really those to reach. And because of the tight, close relationship with patients. Lori had asked a question about how do we be more effective teaching nurses when their time is limited. I feel like this is probably a big question for everyone. And she also mentioned that they're using Vital Talks, which is a phenomenal program. There's so many really great resources. We have just 3 minutes. I don't know if we want to address that question. If you have that's may not be a question for just a quick answer, but
no, I think you can do it in many different ways. Even in a 15-minute unit conference, we've brought in the Gift of Grace card game, which is now called Hello, and just give people a few cards to answer questions. Use little bits of time. It's very important to pick little bits of time. I can't stress enough about what Philip said about the academic calendar and the curriculum. It's very crowded, very prescriptive, very difficult to bring something new and innovative and a little bit challenging into. So using little bits of time, whether it be a whiteboard exercise or everybody put a sticky note on the wall in the conference room or at the nurse's station for their concerns or questions they would have liked to answer to. But all the tools are out there, and you know, all of us that do this education have collected a big bucket of tools. And don't forget to use little bits of time and use some of the tools that are
maximize. Yeah. I love that. I love the maximize time, and the Hello game is a fantastic game. There's some great games like that. Thank you, Kathy. I'm looking at the time. We just have 2 minutes, so I want to spend the last 2 minutes just wrapping up. But thank you for answering that. I know we could go on longer. We're sending the slides out, so you'll have contact information for everybody. So we will not leave you astray if you want to have any other questions or comments. Nina Tiger shared that they were going to reach high school students. And I'm sorry that COVID hit, but I'm excited to see what you're going to be doing through Zoom next year. So Nina, thanks so much for sharing that. Christopher had to pop off, but he says thanks to everybody. And I'm just going to breeze through some slides. You're going to have this just to share a little bit of what's coming next and ways that you can engage with the Conversation Project if you're not familiar with them already. We have a Facebook discussion group for champions, so people who are bringing this work to their communities. You are welcome to join. You're on this call. You can join this Facebook as a private discussion group. We include the link there. It's also on our webpage. You can add your pin to our map, and you can check out the map to see who's doing what in your area. This is on our webpage as well on our Get Involved tab, so I invite you to check that out. Okay, we are on social media, so if you are sharing things and you want us to help amplify what you're sharing, tag us and we'll help to retweet that. The same through Facebook and Instagram, so those are some of our handles. Lots of different ways to stay engaged. If you're not already getting our newsletter, we've got 2 newsletters, one for the general public and one for community champions such as you, so you can sign up for those. And feel free to pass that to anyone that might be helpful. Quickly, our next 2 calls coming up, want to invite you. We talked a lot about the power of stories. Kathy mentioned a lot of the stories that have been shared today with students, and Philip and Christopher as well. On November 18th, so every third Wednesday of every month, the third Wednesday, we have our calls. We're going to talk about championing conversations through the use of stories. So I invite you to join us on that November call. And our December call is going to be a look ahead and a little bit of a retrospect of what's been going on this past year. So I invite you to join us in December. And so with that, I'm going to just quickly, you'll see these slides. There's a lot of great events coming up. You can check these out on these slides in our newsletter and on our Facebook group. We post those events that are around. So with that, if you all have any events you want to share, we'll stay on an extra couple of minutes. You want to chat it in here, you can share it with us. We share those in our newsletter, but join our Facebook group and share that with us. We'd be more than happy to share your events with others. We are going to ask those, I mentioned at the beginning of the call, we have this community activity survey that we're doing right now. If you can spend some time, that's going to pop up. Chrissy, I think that's going to pop up as you exit this. Is that right, Chrissy, or are we going to pop the...
Yeah, that's correct. I'll put it in the chat as well.
Awesome. If you can go ahead and spend a little time on that survey, really would encourage you to. If you haven't done any events, just put 0 in there, but we have some open-ended questions. I'd love to get your feedback on this call as well, so you can pop that in that survey. At the very end, there's an open comment section. We'd love to hear feedback from you on that. You are more than welcome to contact me by email. I include that here. And again, thank you so much, Kathy and Philip, and Christopher, who's left us, for sharing. And with that, thank you for spending 2 extra minutes with us on the call. Thank you all who joined us. I hope you all have a really good day today, and we will see you next month. So thank you all for being here with us today.